My dog started barking at 1:30 a.m. Then I saw my fiancée leaning over the seat in a stranger's car. She looked up when headlights hit her face, and then it was the kind of silence that feels heavy, almost unnatural, the kind that only exists in small towns at night. My house sat at the end of a quiet street in Fairhaven, surrounded by empty lots and half-built homes. The only real sound came from Rusty, my golden retriever, sleeping at the foot of the bed. When he started barking at 1:30 in the morning, it wasn't the half-hearted kind of bark he made at squirrels. It was sharp, loud, frantic. I sat up instantly. At first, I thought it was raccoons getting into the trash again. Then I noticed the way his fur stood on end. His head was turned toward the front window, body stiff, tail still. I got out of bed, trying to calm him, but the barking only grew louder. I walked over to the window and pushed the curtain aside. That's when I saw headlights cutting through the dark, a parked car idling near the curb with its engine running. It wasn't anyone from the neighborhood. The car was new, dark gray, with tinted windows and out-of-state plates. I narrowed my eyes, trying to make out the driver, but what caught my attention wasn't the man inside. It was the figure leaning halfway into the passenger seat, my fiancée, Tara. She was wearing her robe, the pale blue one she'd worn to bed earlier that night. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. The porch light flickered against her hair, and when the car shifted slightly, the beams swept across her face. Her eyes met mine through the window. She froze, like an animal caught mid-step. The car door slammed, the engine revved, and before I could react, the tires screeched against the pavement and disappeared into the dark. I stood there in disbelief. The curtain brushed against my hand. My pulse felt like static. Rusty kept barking, spinning in circles now, confused by my stillness. The entire scene had happened so fast that it almost felt unreal, like something my mind had conjured while half asleep. But the sound of the engine still echoed down the empty street. And the robe, the same robe she was wearing just hours ago, was unmistakable. I threw on jeans and grabbed my keys from the counter. The driveway light flicked on automatically as I opened the door. Rusty followed me out, whining. I told him to stay, though I doubted he understood. I jumped into my truck and started it, driving in the same direction the car had gone. The roads were empty, no traffic, no sign of taillights. Just endless asphalt stretching into dark woods. I drove 3 blocks, then 5, then 7. Nothing. The only sound was the steady hum of my engine and my own uneven breathing. After 10 minutes, I gave up. There was no point driving aimlessly in the dark. I turned back toward home. When I walked back into the house, the first thing I noticed was Tara's phone still sitting on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with a notification as I passed. A text message from someone saved only as Z. I froze. Then another one came in, right beneath it. That was close. He didn't see us, right? I didn't touch her phone at first. My hands were shaking too badly. Eventually, I picked it up, stared at the thread of messages. The history was mostly deleted, but a few lines remained, recent ones. Enough to tell me this wasn't new. They'd been talking for weeks. My chest felt tight. I put the phone down and paced the kitchen, trying to understand. How long had this been going on? How many nights had she gone out for a drive, or to clear her head, while I stayed home, trusting her? I looked around, noticing the smallest things now. Her shoes by the door, one missing. Her purse on the table. A faint smell of perfume still hanging in the air, like a ghost. Rusty had followed me inside, whining softly this time. His eyes fixed on me like he knew something was wrong. I sat on the couch, hands clasped, staring at the phone glowing on the counter. I told myself I'd wait until she came back and asked directly. No shouting, no accusations. Just ask. But even as I thought it, I knew the question didn't matter anymore. The image of her leaning into that car had already burned itself into my memory. At 3:15, I heard the door open. Tara stepped in quietly, barefoot, hair messy like she'd been in the wind. She froze when she saw me sitting there in the dark. The look on her face said everything before a single word left her mouth. Her eyes darted to the counter, to her phone. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The only sound was Rusty's low growl from the corner of the room. She started to speak. An excuse, a lie, something rehearsed. I couldn't tell, but I stood up before she could finish. My voice came out calm, too calm for what I felt. I told her I saw her. I saw the car. She didn't even deny it at first. Just stood there with her mouth half open. Then she said something about helping a friend who was too drunk to drive. I didn't respond. I just walked past her to the bedroom and shut the door behind me. She didn't follow. Not that night. The next morning, she was gone when I woke up. Her phone was missing too, but the faint outline of her car's tire tracks was still on the gravel. I went to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat by the window. For a moment, I thought about calling her parents, maybe even the police. But there was no crime here, only betrayal. The kind that doesn't leave bruises, just silence. That's when I noticed something else. On the floor, under the kitchen stool, was her phone case. It must have fallen when she grabbed the phone in a rush. I picked it up, turned it over, and a small folded photo slipped out from inside. It was one of those Polaroid prints people take at gyms or cafes. Tara was sitting in the passenger seat of that same dark gray car, smiling, sunlight on her face. The man next to her was older than me by a few years, fit, tanned, wearing a gold chain. His hand rested casually on her thigh. Her engagement ring wasn't on. The timestamp on the bottom read last Tuesday. That was the night she'd told me her yoga class ran late. I didn't move for a long time. The coffee went cold. Rusty lay down beside me, head on my foot, waiting for something. Maybe for me to say something. Maybe for me to finally accept what I already knew. When the sun came up, I drove to work like nothing had happened. But inside, everything had shifted. Every detail of that night replayed over and over. The barking, the headlights, her face frozen in shock. I had no proof beyond that photo, no confession, just the truth staring me in the face. Something inside me hardened that morning, something that wasn't going to forgive or forget. Because sometimes, you don't need to catch someone twice. Once is enough. And that night, I caught her perfectly. The morning after felt wrong from the start. The air in the house carried that heavy stillness you get after an argument that never really happened. One of those unspoken wars where silence says more than shouting ever could. Tara hadn't come home after slipping out at dawn. Her side of the bed was untouched, her toothbrush still damp. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at her empty mug. Every minute that passed made me more certain that I needed answers. Not later. Not when she was ready. Now. At 8:20, her car finally pulled up in the driveway. She walked in wearing sunglasses and carrying a bag from the gas station. Her hair was tied up hastily, her shirt wrinkled. She looked startled to see me sitting there. She said she'd gone out for a drive because she couldn't sleep. She said the noise last night, Rusty barking, made her anxious, so she needed air. It sounded rehearsed, but her tone carried that practiced mixture of concern and innocence she'd used before during small arguments. I didn't interrupt. I just nodded and asked if the drive helped. She said yes, sat down across from me, and started sipping coffee as if nothing in the world was wrong. That was her mistake. Acting normal when everything around her was cracked wide open. While she pretended to scroll through her phone, I excused myself, walked out to my truck, and drove to the hardware store on Main Street. Not for tools, just to think. I needed to breathe somewhere that didn't smell like her perfume. I parked behind the building and sat in silence for half an hour, replaying every small lie from the past few months. The extra shifts, the late-night study sessions, the girls' dinners that never showed up in any tagged photos. They'd all been pieces of this puzzle, and I'd ignored them because love makes you stupid. On my way back, I stopped at a small print shop and bought a new SIM card. Back home, I swapped it into an old phone I hadn't used since college. Then I opened her call log. The same number appeared repeatedly, a number not saved as a contact. Calls at midnight, 2 a.m., even during the workday. I searched the area code. Out of town. So I texted it, pretending to be her. Last night was insane. Still thinking about it. The response came less than 30 seconds later. You're dangerous when you do that. Can't get your face out of my head. My pulse pounded in my ears. I stared at the words until the letters blurred. I sent another text. He almost saw us. You were supposed to wait. He won't find out, the man replied. He's clueless. That was enough. I screenshotted the thread and deleted everything. Then I looked at Rusty sleeping by the back door and felt this bitter laugh rising in my chest. My dog had seen the truth before I had. When Tara got home from work that evening, she was cheerful. Almost too cheerful. She'd stopped to get groceries, said she was making lasagna, her special one. The same recipe she'd made the night I proposed. Halfway through chopping onions, I told her I'd found her messages. The knife clattered against the cutting board. She froze, staring at the counter. Then she did what people like her always do. She twisted it. Said I was paranoid. Said I'd violated her privacy. That she was just talking to a friend from the gym. That Zach was helping her with a personal project. When I asked what kind of project, she said, something you wouldn't understand. The calm in her voice was worse than if she'd screamed. I didn't argue. I just walked out onto the porch, letting the screen door creak behind me. The evening air was cold enough to sting. From the driveway, I could still see that same stretch of street where she'd been caught last night. The image burned into my mind. Headlights, her face, the way she froze like someone whose mask had finally cracked. When I went back inside, she was on the couch, pretending to watch TV. She didn't mention the conversation again. Neither did I, but I knew it wasn't over. That night, Rusty started barking again. I shot out of bed. This time, I didn't look through the window. I went straight outside. The front yard was empty. But near the bushes by the mailbox, Rusty was growling at something half buried in the dirt. I knelt down, brushed the leaves aside, and found a wallet. Black leather, worn at the edges. Inside were a few cards, a driver's license, and a small gym membership ID. Zachary Denton. My heart sank. I turned the license over and saw the face. Same tan man from the photo. I went back inside quietly. Tara was still asleep, breathing evenly, as if none of this had touched her. The next day, I drove across town to her gym. I didn't tell her. I didn't even plan what I'd say. I just needed to see the man. The parking lot was half empty, the early morning crowd still coming in. I walked into the main lobby pretending to look for a membership form. Through the glass partition near the training area, I saw him, Zachary. He was spotting a woman on the bench press, flashing that same easy smile. Confident, relaxed. The kind of smile that came from knowing someone's life was unraveling for your amusement. Then, behind him, Tara appeared, wearing gym leggings, laughing at something he said. She playfully nudged his arm. It wasn't the laugh of two friends. She didn't see me. I walked out before I could do something I'd regret. That evening, I canceled the engagement dinner reservations. We'd planned it for Saturday, at her favorite restaurant downtown, a celebration with both families. I called and said we wouldn't be coming. The woman on the phone asked if I wanted to reschedule. I said no. When Tara got home, she asked why I was so quiet. I told her work had been rough. She nodded and went to take a shower. While the water ran, I opened the shared account on my phone. Her gym payments had doubled in the last 2 months. The notes on each transfer read, "Private sessions." She came out wearing her robe, the same one from that night. The sight of it made something twist inside me. She smiled and asked if I wanted to eat. I said I wasn't hungry. She shrugged and sat beside me, scrolling her phone, completely unaware of how far this had already gone. That night, I lay in bed awake, staring at the ceiling while she slept. Her breathing was steady, almost innocent, but I knew that was the sound of someone who thought they'd gotten away with it. Rusty slept at my feet, twitching occasionally, like he was dreaming of the night he tried to warn me. I reached down and ran my hand through his fur. The next step wouldn't be about confronting her again. She'd only lie. It needed to be about seeing how deep the betrayal went, and what kind of person she really was when she thought I wasn't watching. Because if there's one thing I'd learned that week, it's this. Once someone gets comfortable lying to you, they stop hiding their tracks. And that's when they make their biggest mistake. The days that followed were quiet, but not the kind of quiet that brought peace. It was the kind that hums under your skin, the calm before something breaks. Tara moved through the house like everything was fine, humming while making breakfast, asking about my work, and kissing me goodbye as if she hadn't already been caught in a stranger's car. I didn't argue. I smiled back, nodded when she spoke, and pretended to believe her stories. It wasn't forgiveness. It was observation. I needed to know what she was capable of when she thought I'd stopped paying attention. Every night, she'd say she was running late or going out for groceries, and every night I'd track the sound of her car fading into the distance. Sometimes she came home smelling like vanilla lotion, other times like cheap cologne that wasn't mine. Rusty would sit by the window each time she left, ears perked, as if he knew the pattern better than I did. By the end of the week, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to shout or beg or catch her in the act again. That first night was enough. What I needed now was evidence, something undeniable, something that would end the guessing once and for all. So I installed 2 small cameras. One faced the driveway, tucked into the gutter just above the garage door. The other went inside, behind the TV, angled toward the front door. Nothing fancy, just enough to see comings and goings. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted the truth in its rawest form, not the version she'd invent later. 2 nights later, the footage gave me what I needed. It started at 12:48 a.m. A car pulled up, the same dark gray sedan, the same one from that night. The headlights flashed briefly, then shut off. Seconds later, Tara appeared on the camera feed, barefoot, creeping down the hall with her shoes in hand. She glanced toward the bedroom door, paused, and slipped out. For a full hour, nothing. Then, at 2:03, the car returned. She got out, laughing, whispering something into the window before tiptoeing back inside. When she crawled into bed, I pretended to stir in my sleep. She whispered something about restless dreams, and I almost laughed at the irony. The next morning, I transferred all our shared savings to my personal account and printed every transaction she'd made in the last 3 months. She'd spent over $2,000 on personal training. A closer look at the merchant name confirmed it. Zachary Denton Fitness, billed through a side LLC. The same day, I called our landlord and removed her name from the lease. He didn't ask questions. He'd known me for years. I made sure the utilities were switched to my name alone. Every connection between us, financial, legal, logistical, was quietly erased before noon. Then I invited both our families for Sunday brunch. I told Tara it was to celebrate our renewed engagement, that we were moving forward stronger than before. She lit up instantly. That fake enthusiasm spilled out of her like cheap perfume. She hugged me, said she was proud of how mature I was for putting the past behind us. I said nothing. I just smiled and told her to wear something nice. Sunday came fast. The morning sunlight hit the kitchen counter as I set up the projector. I'd already cued the footage, trimmed and silent, ready to play at the tap of a button. When her parents arrived, they brought a bouquet and a bottle of wine. My parents showed up soon after, exchanging polite smiles that barely masked their dislike for each other. Tara fluttered around the table like a perfect host, complimenting everyone's outfits, pouring orange juice, playing the doting fiancé. When everyone sat down, I said I had something special to share before we ate. She looked at me with that loving smile that used to make my stomach turn. I turned the projector on. The screen flickered to life. At first, it showed the driveway. Empty, quiet. Then headlights. The gray sedan rolled into frame. You could hear forks clatter against plates as the room went silent. The next clip was from the living room camera. Tara sneaking out, shoes in hand, pausing at the front door. Someone gasped. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father muttered a curse under his breath. Tara stood frozen beside me, eyes wide, lips trembling. Eli, she whispered, voice cracking, but I raised a hand for silence. The final clip played, her coming back at 2 a.m, smiling, her hair messy, whispering something toward the car window. Then the sedan driving off. When the screen went black, the only sound left was Rusty's tail thumping softly under the table. Tara tried to speak, but her father's voice cut through first. He asked who the man was. She stammered. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. I stayed seated, calm, hands folded. His name is Zachary Denton, I said finally. Fitness trainer. She's been paying him with my savings account. Her father turned pale. My mother stood up, saying she'd known something was wrong with Tara's sudden gym obsession. Tara turned to me, her tone shifting fast. First pleading, then angry. She accused me of humiliating her, said I'd set her up, that this was an invasion of privacy. Her mother shouted her name, but Tara ignored her, trembling now, tears cutting through her makeup. Then, as if the universe hadn't had enough, the sound of a car horn blared from outside. We all turned toward the window. That gray sedan. Again. Zachary climbed out, still wearing his gym sweatshirt, his expression tense. He started walking up the driveway before anyone could react. Tara ran toward the door, screaming at him to leave. Her father tried to stop her, but she yanked free. I followed, staying behind her. Zachary reached the porch, shouting that this was all a misunderstanding. His voice was shaking, his hands gesturing wildly. When he took a step closer, Rusty darted from the house, teeth bared, barking like he had that first night. The dog lunged. Zachary stumbled back, tripping over the step. Rusty didn't bite him, but it was close enough to scare him stiff. He shouted at me to call the dog off. I did, and Rusty stopped immediately, still growling. Tara screamed at both of us, crying now, begging Zachary to leave before someone called the police. Too late. My father had already dialed. The police arrived within minutes. One officer separated me and Zachary, while another spoke to Tara, who kept trying to spin the story, claiming I'd set a trap, that the dog had attacked unprovoked. But when they saw the footage, their tone changed completely. The officer turned to me, nodded slightly, and told me I'd done the right thing saving the evidence. Zachary tried to file a complaint for the attack, but the body cam footage and the officer's witness statements cleared it up quickly. They told him to leave or risk trespassing charges. Tara stood in the doorway, silent, shaking. Her parents left without a word. My parents did the same. The house emptied fast, leaving only the sound of wind against the windows. She collapsed onto the floor, muttering about how I'd ruined her life. I watched her for a moment, then said something simple, not cruel, not dramatic, just the truth, that I hadn't ruined her life. She had. I packed a bag and left that night. I didn't slam the door, didn't shout, didn't look back. Rusty jumped into the truck beside me, curling up on the seat. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing on the porch, barefoot, hair tangled, framed in the porch light. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. The calm I felt wasn't relief. It was something colder. A quiet that said everything that needed to be said. Because after that night, there was no going back, and I didn't want to. When the police left that night, the silence they left behind was heavier than the noise that had filled the house minutes before. The flashing lights faded down the street, leaving only the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of wind against the siding. Tara sat slumped at the bottom of the stairs, eyes swollen, her mascara streaked across her cheeks like bruises. I stood by the front door with Rusty lying beside me, his head resting on his paws. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. After a few minutes, I told her I'd come back in the morning for the rest of my things. She didn't stop me this time. I picked up my overnight bag, whistled for Rusty, and stepped outside. The night air was cold, but clean. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I spent the night at a motel on the edge of town, staring at the ceiling until dawn. Every time I closed my eyes, the scene replayed in fragments. Her sneaking out barefoot, the gray car, the look on her father's face when the video played. There was no satisfaction in any of it. Only clarity. The kind that hurts at first, but eventually sets you free. In the morning, I went back. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Tara's car was gone. The only sign she'd been there was a pile of clothes left on the porch, and the faint smell of her perfume still trapped in the air. On the kitchen table sat her engagement ring, the one I'd saved 3 months for. It was lying in a small puddle of water from a melted ice cube, like she'd tried to throw it, but couldn't bring herself to finish. I took the ring, not out of sentiment, but because I knew what it was worth. I'd spent enough on the illusion already. 2 days later, she started sending emails. First apologetic, then desperate, then angry. The tone shifted each time, from "you ruined my life" to "we can fix this" to "I'll tell everyone what you did." I didn't reply to any of them. I created a filter that sent every message from her straight to a separate folder I never opened. By the end of the week, mutual friends began reaching out. They said Tara had quit her job at the marketing firm. She'd been taking time off to focus on herself. The polite version of what really happened. Word had spread fast about the video. Small towns don't keep secrets well, especially not ones played in high definition at family brunches. Then came the part one didn't expect. Zachary lost his job, too. The gym terminated him for unprofessional conduct with a client. Apparently, Tara had stormed into the place demanding that they defend him. They didn't. From what I heard, she made a scene in front of other members before being escorted out. After that, she moved in with a friend across town. I didn't know where, and I didn't care to. For a while, I stayed quiet. I went to work, took longer shifts, and spent most evenings running Rusty at the park. The first week without her felt empty in a strange way. Not because I missed her, but because I had to learn how to exist without waiting for a lie to drop. There's a certain rhythm you fall into when you live with deceit. It keeps you tense, alert. When it's gone, the silence feels too wide, like you've forgotten how to live normally. Then, slowly, I started sleeping better. I stopped checking my phone in the middle of the night. The air in the house began to smell like coffee instead of perfume again. Rusty stopped growling at the window. I sold the engagement ring 2 months later. Not online. I drove to a jeweler 2 towns over, a quiet man who didn't ask questions. He counted the bills slowly and handed them over without a word. I took the cash and signed Rusty up for a professional training course he'd qualified for. He'd always been a smart dog, restless and protective, like he needed a job to do. Now he had one. By spring, we were competing in local obedience trials. Rusty loved the attention. Crowds cheered for him. Kids clapped when he ran the course. And for the first time since the chaos, I felt proud of something again. Every ribbon he won felt like a quiet form of justice. Not against her, but against what she'd turned me into. One afternoon, while walking back to the truck after a competition, I saw her. Tara. She was standing by the entrance of a hotel on Main Street, wearing a crisp uniform shirt and holding a cleaning cart. Her hair was tied back, her face pale. When she noticed me, she froze. Our eyes met for just a second. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She turned away and disappeared inside. I stood there, watching the door close behind her, and felt nothing. No anger, no gloating. Just stillness. Like the story had finished writing itself long before I showed up to read the last page. That night, I drove home with the windows down and Rusty's head poking out the side. The wind whipped through the cab, and the streetlights blurred into streaks. I realized how long it had been since I'd driven anywhere without feeling that anxious weight on my chest. I parked in the driveway, stepped out, and looked at the house. It was quiet again, but this time, the quiet felt earned. I sat on the porch for a while, Rusty beside me, his fur glowing in the light from the window. Somewhere down the street, another dog barked, distant, harmless. I smiled. Because the truth is, the night Rusty barked at 1:30 wasn't the start of my heartbreak. It was the start of my rescue. That bark had saved me from marrying someone who would have spent a lifetime making me doubt my own sanity. It pulled the curtain down before the act was over. And maybe that's why, even now, I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and listen for the sound of him growling softly at the window. It's not fear anymore. It's gratitude. Every betrayal leaves behind an echo. Some fade, some don't. But if you listen closely, there's always a moment when the noise dies down and you realize what's left isn't emptiness, it's space. Space to rebuild, to breathe, to let go. That's what I did. And as for Tara, last I heard, She left town 6 months later. Someone said she moved south with a cousin, trying to start over. I don't wish her well or ill. I just hope she learned something from it. Rusty's trophies line the shelf in my living room now. Each one a reminder of the night everything fell apart and somehow came back together in a different shape. The kind of ending that isn't pretty, but real. The kind that hurts and heals in equal measure. The kind you don't forget, because it reminds you that sometimes, all it takes to save yourself is to finally listen to the noise that wakes you up.